Okay, today's lovely topic is transpiration. Just trying to get this all on. There we go. So, transpiration does not begin at the root. So, in one of our earlier videos, in the same playlist, obviously, we did water movement across the root, and we did how, the sort of root hair cells have a low water potential and water's taken up by osmosis. But what actually causes the water to get from the root all the way to the top of the very tallest tree is this thing called transpiration. So you'll see that I've got a TS of a leaf here, and you probably should have recognised that. I'll say should have, because you might not have done. And what's happening in the air spaces, and this is what you sort of did when we did gas exchange. Obviously we've got carbon dioxide going into the leaf, and it's being used in photosynthesis. So that maintains a low concentration on the inside of the leaf, and you've got high concentration. These little square brackets are just sort of chemistry shorthand for concentration. And then of course produced by photosynthesis, and therefore going in the opposite direction from high concentration to low concentration, we've got oxygen. So that's just to do with photosynthesis. And I would remind you that you do need to know the word equation for photosynthesis. If I had a penny for every time a student had said to me, the stomata are open so that transpiration can happen, I'd be currently sunning myself on a lovely tropical beach somewhere in the Caribbean with a nice cocktail probably. So what's actually happening with water in the leaf is that water is evaporating from the surface of the cells into these air spaces. So this area here represents evaporation. It's then diffusing, so obviously you get a build-up of water vapour, and the water vapour is diffusing out. Now it's important that you call this water vapour and not just water. Water vapour is the gaseous form of water. And that diffuses out because you've always got evaporation into this airspace here, so that's always going to build up a sort of a layer of humidity, and then air's always drier. So where do those cells then get their water from? So if we're evaporating water away from the surface, what we're doing to the cell contents is we're making them more concentrated in terms of solute. So in the cells we'll have a low water potential. I'm not sure that's showing up very well. Let me do it in black. Blue on blue, not a good colour combination. So this is a low water potential in the cells. And of course in our vascular bundle here we've got xylem carrying water, and it's got loads of water. So what we get is osmosis out of the xylem and into these cells that are losing water. So this process here, that would be osmosis from the xylem to the cells. Now remember those three pathways that water can take between cells, so its movement between cells is still going to be through the apoplast pathway in the cell wall, through the symplast pathway, through the cytoplasm and plasmodesmata, and through the vacuolar pathway from vacuole to vacuole. But your key things on this diagram is this constant loss of water by evaporation into the air spaces, diffusion out of the open stomata, and then the water therefore being withdrawn from the xylem and into the cells. So let's just move on to then what's happening in the xylem. This is another one, a lovely picture of the internet. I love the internet. This is Andrea, biologiesweebly.com, whoever Andrea may be. So, at the top end, this process of transpiration describes that evaporation and diffusion out into the atmosphere. Then you've got to think, well, what's happening in the xylem vessels themselves? So when we're taking the water out of the xylem, how is that causing the water to move upwards? So what's causing the water to move upwards is this cohesive force, the hydrogen bonding between water molecules. So this means that the water is cohered together. So as you take one water molecule out of there, it kind of, pulls up its chums that it's hydrogen bonded behind it. And the key thing here is that the water is pulled up. And of course it's moving in xylem vessels. There is also, and we can see another force on here, so we've got our water molecules all cohered together, but we also have an adhesive force, so we've got adhesion between the water and the xylem vessels. So that means that sort of helps to maintain that column, so keeps it so that it's not breaking. What it means practically from the plant is that the water column and the xylem vessels move as one. So what's actually causing the movement up the middle is we've got evaporation and diffusion out of the stomata, and that water is then moving out of the xylem by osmosis, and as one water molecule leaves the xylem, it pulls that column up behind it. So we call this theory, and a theory of course in biology means that it's been shown to happen. We're pretty sure that this is what goes on. There may be a few details to add in with further research. We call this the cohesion tension theory. And if you're describing it, you need to start in the leaf. So, describing it, water evaporates, from mesophyll cells. You don't need to distinguish between them, and diffuses through open stomata. Then we can say something about the water potential. Water potential of mesophyll cells lowers, and water moves out of xylem by osmosis. And what that does is a water column is pulled up through xylem vessels. Why? Because, my favourite words, because the water molecules are cohered by hydrogen bonds and adhered the xylem walls. Now this is a pulling force, and it's a bit like having an elastic band, obviously just when you want one, not got one handy. So as you're pulling from the top, that column is going to stretch and get thinner, and we say that it's under tension. So this is where the tension comes in. Cohesion refers to the water molecules. Tension refers to the fact that the water column stretches. So the water column stretches and narrows and is under tension. What tension actually means practically is that water column actually has a negative pressure, and that's why xylem vessel elements need to have that big thick lignin thickening just to stop it sort of collapsing inwards, and that force is sort of all the way back from the root. Now there are another two forces, and they're very, very small, and they don't move water very far. One of them is capillarity, and you'll see that on a number of diagrams. I've just had to reject an awful lot of diagrams on the basis that it's saying capillarity is the main force. This is the idea that if you've got a very narrow tube, the water molecules will stick to the sides of it and kind of pull themselves up. It's a tiny, tiny force. And the other one is the idea that at the bottom end of the plant, in the root, you're actually pumping mineral ions into the bottom, and therefore water will follow by osmosis, and that creates a little tiny pressure. So there's two additional sort of small forces going on in the root pressure and capillarity. Your main method, cohesion tension theory, that's the one you absolutely need to know.